Hello, everyone. I'm Adam with D&D Beyond. Thank you for joining me for this week's development update and community Q&A session. Let's see what is in the lineup for today. Latest updates, like always. I think we've done this a few times, so I think that we get the rhythm. We do have a little bit of a special thing going on today here, or a lot of bit. It's a lot of bit of a special thing, to be honest, because after the latest updates and upcoming, we are going to have another version of Tech Talk with Mr. Dave Hartless, our head of engineering for D&D Beyond. He's going to be joining us, and I don't even know if you're seeing him or not right now, but because I can't see what you're seeing. But Dave is here, and he's going to join us for Tech Talk, and he's also going to be here for the Q&A portion of today's show. So if you have questions, any normal old question is fine. You can preface it with the word question, but if you have something very specifically for our head of engineering, then definitely jump in and ask that, and we will let him actually answer it in all the techno babble, or whatever the more flattering terminology would be for speaking about technology. But he will be here joining me to do that part of it too. Let's jump right in. Latest updates. So this month, just like with birthdays around my house, I both of my sons have the same birthday. They're 4 years apart, but they have the same birthday. So we have these huge birthday celebrations, and it turns into, not just a day, but more like a week. And then, lately it's getting more like a month. So we're doing that with D&D Beyond's third anniversary as well. So the month of August, if you are a subscriber, then you can unlock the Dice of Healing. I'm going to just check these out one more time because they really are pretty cool. Oldest. Wow, this is interesting. I'm going to go with this. So the oldest character that I have on D&D Beyond is Gamdell Banglabon. I don't even know if he works anymore. Hey, wow, I have a portrait frame that is the old little fish bowl. It's not even animated though. Like, I feel a little bit embarrassed about that. So we're going to change this to at least the animated fishbowl for Gamdell. So the fish is floating around now. That's better. Gamdell is really, really not optimal when it comes to what's going on with his class setup, but he is ID 10 on the database here. So Gamdell is from early days here. I we'll have to ask Dave who ID 1 is. Actually, I don't even know who that is. So let's see who that is later. But yeah, so this is the Dice of Healing that you can see here. Let's see. It's going to take forever to roll something good. But yeah, the Dice of Healing are there. Let's roll some fireball damage. I don't think that this character could ever do a fireball. But yeah, so the Dice of Healing, very, very cool set of digital dice. And those are available for anyone who is a subscriber, active subscriber in the month of August. So be sure to subscribe and pick up that set of dice. Very cool. We are working on class feature variants. The extended spell list are the first part of this that will get us things like spells for dragon mark races, guilds, and Ravnica, that sort of thing. So we're working very hard on that, and soon we're going to have more news about that. Combat tracker, getting digital dice into the sidebar. We're also pretty close there. So that is going to be the little fab floating action button to the bottom left of the screen that you'll be able to click, and you can use dice while you're on the combat tracker. We will do further integration on that in the future, but the first iteration is getting that sidebar there. And then the encounter builder, random encounter generation, we're going to have a first pass on that before too much longer too, and we'll keep you posted there. Upcoming, so working on characters integration in the combat tracker. So we're going to, again, continue to iterate there and hope that the database survives it all. Player Tools mobile app, description and notes are coming, as well as digital dice rolling to the app. So we'll keep all the news rolling when it comes to that. We are iterating pretty quickly with the mobile app. So If you haven't checked for an update in a while, be sure to jump in there and grab the updates and keep that app up to date, because we are going to continue to add to it, very quickly over time. And then the character builder, we're going to also add dice there where you can roll ability scores within that. And there are a few things that almost made this upcoming list this week, but are not quite ready for us to talk about yet. But here in the next few weeks, this list, you're going to see it expand as well. All right, we are now at Tech Talk. So I would like to introduce our Director of Engineering, Dave Hartless, and he is going to come to speak to us today a little bit about one of the biggest requests that we've had, especially since we have posted Dice of Healing out there that have a ridiculous stopper on the model. People have asked us how balanced our dice are, how we get the numbers and the results for the dice. So I believe, Dave, you're going to jump into a little bit more of the technology about how all that works.
Yep. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about that. To your earlier question, ID1 in the database for a character, I can't remember exactly who it was, but it's one of three. It's either Stavanis, Out of Hand, or Prelak.
Okay.
So it was one of those three characters. We're going to look that up in a little while.
Yeah, that sounds
good. So let's talk about our dice. Quite a few people have been asking about that and how we calculate the dice and how we roll those. So we use a product called Babylon, which is written in JavaScript or TypeScript, and is basically a physics engine that runs in your browser. And so when the model enters the scene, right? So once you see the dice on your page, the physics engine is in complete control of that, right? So everything that happens in that model from that point on is all based on the physics of that model moving around on your screen. So the collisions that it's making, hitting the flat surface or the bottom of your character sheet, bouncing around and hitting the edges of the screen, colliding with any other dice that may be on the screen. The physics engine is in total control of that at that point. And that's going to vary from computer to computer, right? Because different people are going to have different screen sizes. Different people are going to have different processors that are processing that physics at different rates and different speeds. Even if you were on the same exact computer as a friend of yours, if you had the exact same build, if you're running other apps in the background that are eating up additional CPU cycles, that could have effect in those physics calculations while they're churning. So the results would not even be the same between those different computers. But before the dice actually even enters the scene, so once you're clicking on the button and we start processing through our code, we randomize using math.random, which is a base function in JavaScript, and different browsers implement it a little bit differently. So it can be different from browser to browser. It's like Chrome versus Safari versus Firefox. Don't really know what Edge does. So
does anybody know what Edge does?
I kid. But we do randomize. We do use that randomize function for several different inputs as we're building out that model and getting ready to introduce it into the scene. So we randomize the starting die face, right? So what face the die is actually going to start on. So what is face up? We also randomize the direction throw. So what direction that dice is going to be moving when it enters the scene. We randomize the force of the throw. So how much force is going to be behind this model as it's coming into the scene along that direction. And then we also randomize the rotational spin of the die, right? So we have 4 different vectors that we're randomizing on for every single one of those dice that get entered into the scene. And then once that model is created and into the scene, then the physics takes over and uses all of those initial inputs to bounce it around all over the place. And that's where it will eventually end up. In talking about the potion of healing, obviously that looks really weird because we have this, this pseudo glass container with this neck on top of it and a stopper. And, the first initial impression is, well, how can that thing effectively bounce around correctly, with that big protrusion? But since we are using a physics engine, we can do some really cool things. Those dice, and actually all of our dice, they have an internal mesh or model that is the collider. So that's what the physics engine is actually using as this model is bouncing around through the scene, right? There's a secondary mesh around that, which is effectively like the skin, right? And that's what the neck is attached to. So that neck sticking out of that bottle is not impacting in any way the actual physics collisions that are going on for this dice. So, and we've done some really some really funny internal testing with that. We've had dice that were rubber ducks. We've had dice that were dragons, just to see them, bouncing around and moving through the scene correctly, because they're using that internal mesh collider versus the actual skin itself. It's really, really pretty fun to watch. The other peculiar thing about the healing potion set is you see the liquid on the inside, kind of like sloshing around. And the initial thought would be, oh, well, that liquid has weight to it, and it's going to affect the roll of that. But it's really not, because that isn't actually part of the model. That what you're seeing that looks like liquid is all done through shader effects. So there's no weight to it at all. It actually has no impact with the physics engine at all as it's moving and rotating around. The shaders are picking up what's going on, with the internal collider mesh, and then using those effects to kind of make it look like it's rippling and moving around. And in some of our initial testing, and talking about the results themselves, some of our initial testing, we tried to do a fairly large number of rolls for sample testing as we were in development, and looking at the distribution of those results. And through alpha and now into beta, from what we've tested with internally, those distributions look normal, as we would expect.
Unless I'm rolling on a dev update.
Unless you're rolling on a dev update, because we do have code in there that says if Atom and dev update 1. So that's what you're going to get.
I thought that had to be the case.
But obviously we're not at a state yet to where we're tracking, and actually logging every single roll that every single user makes. But that is something that is next up on our list. In fact, we actually have some initial prototypes and proof of concepting going on right now, because the part of our envision for dice is that you will have the dice log for your game that's occurring, so you will see the roll results not only for yourself but everybody else that's active in that session. And we will be using WebSockets to broadcast that out to everybody that's connected to that session and playing. But at the same time, we'll be logging all those results, right? So we'll be storing those off, and then we can put those, into our data warehouse through our data engineering and data analytics teams, and have them actually look at all of our data, in mass, and ensure that those distributions remain in a normal pattern. And if they don't, if we ever see that something looks off, then that gives us the ability to go in and relook at that code and readjust things and retest. So that's pretty quick rundown of dice. I'm sure that will probably spur some additional questions.
Well, I have a question real quick, Dave, that I'm going to jump in with, because something that we have, of course, seen in the community is this request, as we have the notification area of the dice going up, not rolling under the notification area there.
Right.
So from a physics perspective, how, and again, not final solution clearly, because to be honest, I imagine some of the other stuff that we're doing is going to alleviate the need for even doing anything about that. But if we were going to stop that from happening, is that as simple as giving that notification, basically treating it like a wall within the physics engine? Like how would that
we would need to like section off a portion of the screen.
Okay.
And the dice would start colliding around that, and it would be like an exclusion zone. So effectively like a wall, like if you're running around in Diablo, your character is just going to hit a wall and like, oh, I can't go there, and kind of bounce off.
Got it. Okay. Fantastic. So anything else on dice, Dave, before we, I think it's a little contest or giveaway here, and then questions. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it from a high level view. We could definitely get into a lot more detail. We may want to bring Jason and Chip on for that one in the future, and really get down into how we're utilizing Babylon, and more of the actual physics behind it, and how we do our meshes and how we do our skins. So if people are interested in that, that's something we could do in the future.